Next, we'll move on to reports from department heads. I suspect that's why a lot of you are here tonight. So, Mr. Landrum.
Thank you. Wanted to first start out by saying how social media has changed the landscape of communication. With your good and bad things, sometimes it can be bad as far as communication misunderstandings. And some people thought that we heard that some people thought that tonight we were presenting the final findings of the economic development strategic plan. That's far from it. We're just now wanting to get it started. But interesting enough, I posted this yesterday, and this was a conceptual drawing from the vendor, Stantec, who we are recommending tonight. But we have now received 17,000 views of this posting. Out of a 30,000 residents, 17,000 views. Now, granted, there's a lot outside the township, but that's outstanding. So this is exciting of doing this. We're setting this up tonight and doing our recommendation to the Board of Trustees from the work that we have done within the last few months, which Catherine is going to give us some of the history. But I just want to note that please, our Facebook page, and we're on Twitter and the township website, we will be heavily using that as a communication tool. Plus, any meeting that we have here, we'll definitely communicate, and as well as doing press releases and hopefully get into newspaper and even television if we can. But be watching out that we do have announcements soon to follow. But with that, I'll let Catherine. As soon as I switch gears here in the presentation, we'll let Catherine begin. Go ahead.
Thank you, Pete. There we are. Thank you, Pete. I would like to go over just some of the history to the Strategic Redevelopment Plan, some of our goals and objectives in going through this process, how the community members can get involved, and really what it will mean to the township in the future as we continue to try to seek more private investment within our community. The township trustees did approve the release of a request for qualifications related to the strategic plan on November 12th, 2014. The step followed a summer of community engagement where residents and business owners overwhelmingly identified vacant properties, aesthetics, and poor property maintenance conditions along Delhi Pike as priorities for the township's community and economic development efforts. So the bottom line of this plan is to address those concerns and really to approach it from the aspect of feasibility and implementation. We, to use the old expression, don't want another plan to gather dust on the shelf. We want to actually be able to use this to actually create some positive change within the community. Delhi has a unique economy. We can't necessarily replicate other successful developments. We can't be a Kenwood necessarily because we really are kind of landlocked. We're a smaller stage community. We can't support some of the larger development. But if we're armed with a thorough market analysis across various sectors, residential, commercial, we can actually use these third-party recommendations that will be backed by financial pro formas to actively target and market towards developers that, first off, would be interested in Delhi as a community. Secondly, will succeed and bring some long-term economic stability to the township. We want to be able to take this plan and use it. Some of what we'll be doing with this is, in a second step, we'll be making adjustments to some of our current land use controls to improve aesthetics within the district and to ensure that there's a good synergy between what we have on the Pike and within the district in general and what the needs of the residents are. We'll also use this plan to stay ahead of the market. We'll reach out to private developers and business owners, oftentimes before they've even heard of a place called Delhi Township, Ohio, and really try to convince them that we have third-party numbers. They can make money here. They should locate here. It's for their benefit. It's a wonderful community. And through all of this, we hope to provide a better mix of services for you all as well. Just briefly, we'd like to touch on the selection process that we used to determine the best firm to assist us. We released the request for qualifications immediately after trustee approval, and we got 12 submissions by the deadline. We were frankly overwhelmed by the diversity and the caliber of the responses that we received. The firms were really excited by the approach that we took in combining the aspects of market analysis with land use planning. An evaluation committee who also formed this plan as well, but also took these firms through the process, included Tom, the Director of Development Services, Tom Stahlhaber, Pete Landron, the Township Administrator, Jim Luby, the Fiscal Officer, and myself. We received each of the submissions and ranked the firms based on their knowledge and experience, their capacity, the proximity, and references that they had. There were 3 firms that came out ahead of the process that were invited to proceed to interviews. They were New Republic DPI, MKSK GBBN, and Stantec. I'm keeping Stantec at just one, but just so you know, all 3 of these were collaborations of multiple firms because it's impossible to find a one-stop shop that's able to deliver what we're looking for. The evaluation committee met with each of the firms and revisited the ratings in the firm knowledge and experience to determine the best fit for this overall project. And the top-ranked firm at the end of the process was found to be Stantec. Their Urban Places group is based in Boston, Massachusetts, but they're very active in our region, and they have a regional office here in Cincinnati as well. So a little bit about Stantec's team. Stantec specializes in urban design, placemaking, community engagement, multiple planning and architectural specialties. They're a national firm, and they have a wonderful reputation. But again, because they're in one discipline, though it overlaps somewhat with some of what we wanted out of this project, they did decide that they wanted to bring in 2 subcontractors for this project with whom they've worked in the past. The first is ZVA, Zimmerman Volk and Associates, and they will provide the residential market analysis piece. This firm has been highly successful using an internally derived, repeatedly tested algorithm and methodology to predict future market conditions in the residential sphere. The other firm is going to be WZHA, which is hard to pronounce, but they specialize in community revitalization. Communities such as ours that are aging somewhat, we're kind of landlocked. They specialize in pro forma analysis of sites within communities just like ours to prove that there's a good return on investment in our community. We really need both elements of this, because demand is generated by a resident population, but it's pretty obvious from what we've heard from the residents that your commercial needs aren't being met. So we need to find a way to marry these different concepts together.
The next slide is what we ideally view as the redevelopment district. This could change with engaging in with Stantec. As far as what it could look like. We basically followed the major path lines all the way to the east. We went to the Cincinnati border. And, of course, if you notice that there are different elements within this district. It's not all retail. It's not all residential. It's not all mixed use. It's not all 2-family homes. It's all mixed throughout. But we decided that this was the district that we would focus on as far as the offshoots of the business corridor. The gateway area we felt was very vital to up against Cincinnati coming in. Believe it or not, as we invest in that side, they'll invest. We both will gain. We heard presentation about Price Hill and some investments that are going out there that are just outstanding. It's not a competition in that way. You know, what's good for them is good for us and vice versa. So we will definitely build upon that. But this district can change. Just wanted you to focus that this is there are different land uses throughout this, what we would call the heart of Delhi. I referred to this, and I told Catherine I would have to mention it, but ever since we drew it, I call it the gas pump district because doesn't it look like a gas pump handle? Anyway, she didn't like it either, but it's the redevelopment district. This is initially what we think we will go with, but it could change.
We required a lot of deliverables out of this project. It started organically. Tom Stahlhaber has wanted to revise land use for a long time and thought that getting the economic perspective added to it would be a wonderful idea. So we're actually combining a lot of different elements, and we're going to get a lot out of this plan. We're going to get the land use plan for the entire district, which will guide any future zoning amendments that may take place, an underlying market analysis for residential, office, retail sectors, a development feasibility study, which will involve pro forma financing analysis of 3 priority sites within the district. And I'm going to add here that whichever sites are identified by the consultants will have total buy-in from the property owners. That's just essential. If somebody isn't even interested in changing the use of their property, then we move on. We find something that's feasible that we can actually get done. And finally, we can use all this information to compile site brochures for use in selling the benefits of Delhi to businesses that may want to relocate here, developers that may want to build here. This is something that will greatly aid me when it comes to talking to these individuals that might invest in our community.
The biggest part of this that we said is that this has to be usable. This has to be implementation from the get-go. This isn't a pretty book sitting on a shelf that in 10 years somebody looks at and said, oh, I remember when we did this, We haven't acted upon any of it. We want this to be, as soon as it's done, we're in the room with developers. We're in with significant parties that want Delhi and want Delhi to improve. With that, other policies that we have already implemented or are in the works of. If you were here at 5:45, you saw us do our CIC meeting, our Community Improvement Corporation. We had a meeting. We established this. It's the arm, you could say, economic development arm of the township. The township cannot buy and sell property just at will. We have to declare it for public use, meaning if we're going to use it for, for public works building, a fire station, a park, anything like that, yes, we can buy land. But to say, hey, we're going to buy land and we're going to develop it and sell it and make profit and all that, the township itself cannot do that. The CIC has unique powers that can do that sort of things. So that has been created and is up and running. The next is creating a new tax increment finance, a new TIF. We have a TIF. We're in the works of creating a new TIF. The TIF is basically, anybody know what a TIF is? A TIF is when you take the value of a property and pay that they pay on the valuation of the property. Well, a TIF takes it above that, locks that valuation, what the current valuation is at the present moment, and says, hey, now when this property improves, when you build X, Y, and Z on this, when you make these improvements, the added value that's added from that point in time, that money gets paid, those taxes, it's not new taxes, so to speak, it is based on the value, but this isn't considered a tax increase. But the money towards that goes into the TIF fund, comes to the township. Well, what does the township do with that fund? It reinvests that money into public capital improvements. So that we can say, hey, this company X, Y, and Z would love to come in that, but we need a curb cut and an intersection change or something to make that happen. TIF funds and dollars could be used for such things as sewer and water improvements. Public infrastructure is what it must be. So we're in the middle when the original 1994 TIF was done. Property was a little bit different. So now we're going back within the district that we just showed you. We're going back and doing the commercial properties that have not been TIF'd, and we will be doing the TIF on that probably within, hopefully next month or two, we can get that underway. We have to have its own set of public hearings and so forth with that. The next, of course, is joint economic development districts, and of course that is when the township and the property owner and business owner enter into agreement to basically apply like an income tax to the wages and the earnings of the business. That is when there is a full agreement with the property and business owners to develop that district. And of course, again, those funds can be helped to redevelop an area, to develop or redevelop an area. And also, what's different about that than TIF, the new TIF, Joint Economic Development Districts, also that funding can also help offset like safety service costs. Because when a business comes in, there's more ambulance runs, there's more fire protection, there's more police calls, there's more everything. So that's something's unique about the JED, that they the Ohio, when they created that, understood that, hey, it's more than bricks and mortar or curbs and gutters to fix, but there is a cost to having more service demand. And lastly, we will always pursue grants. There's definitely possibilities of grants out there. Once we have identified information from Stantec that here's the possibilities, there could be multiple grants. Even the CIC could get some grants through that, or other entities could obtain grants for this area. But the biggest thing is, in doing this plan, it'll identify what the possibilities are. Next.
So a very important point of why we're doing this and how we're doing it is that we want as much community engagement as we can get over the next few months. There will be a series of workshops and presentations throughout the planning process so that individuals can come, they can comment, they can help brainstorm through different charrette activities. So that especially if you live within the district or if you work within the district, that you have a voice. Because everybody wants all these things that are listed up here, all of these concepts, but every single person defines each of those concepts differently. A vibrant economy, a diverse mix of land uses and retail, that's different to everybody. So we do want to hear all those voices. We will be involving the community in as many different ways as we can.
So with that, in the agenda tonight, Resolution 2015-037, the township staff will, is recommending the approval of the Stantec contract, and with that approval, the staff will begin the research and the community engagement process immediately, trying to set the dates for the kickoff, which we have tentative date I'm not going to share yet, but it's going to be the end of April, sometime first part of May. It's going to be very quickly. We will be inviting all the community leaders, every stakeholders. There's going to be interviews. We're going to be reaching out to, when we do the residential and the market analysis, we're going to need experts in the field from here, from realtors to different types of professionals that live within the community or around the surrounding community that know Delhi. We're going to be reaching out for assistance to meet with Stantec and its subcontractors, the companies we mentioned, to help with the analysis of the information, because they don't have all the information. It's different. It's hard enough when you live just on the other side of Cincinnati. If you live on the east side, do they know anything about the west side? Anybody? Any Eastsiders know anything about the west side? Nah. So if you think that's different enough, just the Eastsiders don't know, well, you imagine we have to fill in the gaps for. They have the statistics and data that they will gather, but they need the people on the ground that know the market and know the residential components really well, so that they can make sure that they fill in any gaps. So just point taken, we're going to be asking for participation. Of course, intensive planning workshops, all that. Like I said, we're going to be reaching out to everybody through advertisements. I already said that, through the social media, through press releases, so forth. So please look for that. And basically, this is for implementation. Active marketing of Delhi is a great place to live, work, and do business. We want that heard from the mountaintops. And I think that's something that when all this comes down to it, it's going to be well heard and well seen that Delhi is a great place to live.
Just a few quick hits from the rest of the economic development world in Delhi, just things that I thought that the trustees, the community should know. There is a resolution tonight regarding the acquisition of land for the Parks Department. Josh is going to speak largely on that, as well as Pete, but I just wanted to provide an economic perspective for this resolution. Delhi doesn't have too many draws regionally. There aren't a lot of reasons why people say, oh, I'm going to Delhi. Our parks and our athletics are definitely the primary draw from the region. Through tournaments, through different sporting events, we get some active consumers along the pike, people eating at our restaurants, people shopping at our businesses. Traditionally, on the west side of the township, there hasn't been much to draw people there at all who don't live there. So if there's an additional draw that can take place on the west side of the township in any capacity, especially something like athletics, which Delhi is already known for, then it's definitely something that could have a lot of positive economic benefit to the township. Secondly, there are resources, and I just wanted to bring people's attention to this. We do post resources for businesses, particularly new businesses. I've put some things up there recently on the Delhi Township website. There are contacts and a little bit of information about some of the required regulatory agencies for individuals who are seeking to start a business. There are also lists of incentives. These are for both developers and for small businesses. There are also some other, all these presentations, all of these press releases, everything that we talk about in the development sphere is also listed under the Economic Development tab to the left side of the homepage on our website. Finally, it's already been stressed, but just to provide some context to the township's bicentennial, next year in December marks the 200th anniversary of the state of Ohio recognizing Delhi, spelled Delhigh at the time, as its own political entity. And a lot of the nonprofits in the community have gathered together, and they're putting an awful lot of effort into this. They want it to be a year-long celebration with different events hosted by different entities throughout the year, and it should be a lot of fun. So many thanks to everybody on the steering committee, everybody who's going to be volunteering their time leading some of these committees going forward.
And with that, with the resolution 2015-034 dealing with property land acquisition of the basically what would become parkland if approved, we decided that we thought we want to give some history and background of this property and location. To some, if this is the first time you have heard this, you're saying this is out of the blue. I've never even heard about it. Well, I guess it's possible, but this has been long over 10 years that we've been dealing with this property, and there's much history to that. So we want to fill in not only the trustees, but the public with the history of this land. So Josh Torbeck, our Parks Director, will take it from here.
I'm excited about this property, so if I'm smiling the whole entire time I'm talking, you have to excuse me for that. But this was put on my desk pretty much day one when I walked in the door, so it's been a long time coming for me, not only the township. I'm going to give you a brief history, kind of give you a description of the property, and tell you all that's been done over the years. It's about 5.75 acres. It's located at the corner of Hillside Avenue in Cleves, Warsaw. The current landowner acquired the property approximately 35 years ago. And right away, he had this vision that he wanted to develop a park or space for the youth of Delhi. With that vision in mind, he's been working with Hamilton County, MSD, private contractors, engineering firms, Delhi Township, to ensure that everything he did along the way was done properly, it was designed properly, and documented properly. 2003, Delhi Township, they entered a lease agreement with the property owner. It was a one-year lease that was renewable each year through 2006. The end of each lease, there was an option to buy, but at the time the price was just too steep. So what's changed? The property owner kept that goal in mind. He wanted to provide a space for the youth of Delhi Township. That's been his main focus. So what's changed is the asking price has significantly come down since then. This next photo is what would be your view if you're standing at the northwest corner of the property. As you can see, it's cleared, it's flat, it's a great space. Here's an aerial view. You'll have a better idea. The road running left to right would be Cleves, Warsaw, and from your bottom of your screen, north would be Hillside Avenue. I'm going to go over the improvements, a lot of significant improvements that the landowner has done to this property. It's pretty impressive, actually. Approximately 184,000 square feet of the property has been raised well above the floodplain level. Some areas as much as 12 feet. A couple Saturdays ago, I went for a drive and I was decided this was the opportunity to go by the property and make sure that everything that we had documented and seen was correct, and it was bone dry. So when a lot of the areas around were flooded, this property stayed as dry as can be. So that was a good sign. The area that was raised was rough graded, and the rock was removed. As time goes on, some of that will settle, and some rock will come to surface, but we can take care of that. Approximately 77,000 square feet of the parking surface and drive has been added with grinded blacktop and gravel. If you go there now, you'll see a pretty defined parking area and drive in and out of the property. About 20 years ago, MSD of Greater Cincinnati installed sewer lines, and they run through the property. The lines were installed, like I said, with the development in mind. So they're an ideal location where if we were to put in a restroom in the future, that they're right there, easily tapped. Like I said, the property owner continued to have that vision in mind. He also decided that there's one access point right now, and that's off of Cleves Warsaw, but he saw in the future that Hillside, there might need to be a potential second access point on Hillside. So he, once again, raised it, graded it, put down gravel, and now there's a second access point that we would have access to. Keep in mind, during all these projects, he had the foresight to install culverts, head walls, drainage ditches, to make sure that any project that he did, the whole property, even the raised surfaces, were able to drain properly. So each step was carefully planned along the way. So what makes this property so great? It's flat. If you're from Delhi, you know anything about Delhi, finding flat land here is at the premium, and it's almost 6 acres of almost completely flat ground. There's a water aquifer located on site, which can be utilized for irrigation, future restroom use. Any plans of development, we're looking at lowering operational cost, and this is one way we can do that. Water and energy are both available resources right there on the property. And I think one of the understatements is where the property sits. It sits on the western border of Delhi Township. How many townships get the opportunity to possibly develop a park that's the first thing you see when you drive in and the last thing you see on the way out? That's a great opportunity to present our township in a great light that visitors and residents alike can really benefit from. Muddy Creek is located on the property, making it essentially a riparian corridor. Why is this important? Any development we do in the future is going to be done through donations, grants, and being a riparian corridor, it opens up substantial and additional opportunities for grants, especially with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. A lot of their grants, especially the larger ones, deal with property that is located within the riparian corridor. In addition to the grants I spoke about with the riparian corridor, there's a lot of grants out there for parks and recreation, whether it's the developers for playgrounds, whether it's Home Depot, whether it's Nature Works. There's a lot out there, and I'm excited about the opportunity, the task to find that funding, and see what I can do.
All right, and I kidded Josh before. I said I already have the name of the park. And he's like, what? I said, Grant Park, because that's how we're going to fund it, Grant Park. Strategic redevelopment funding, I just want to address these two things. That is general fund subsidy to the zoning fund, so it is basically funded by the general fund. The project was funded at $100,000 in the zoning fund. Originally, we didn't know how much this was going to be, and we did $100,000 in economic development initiatives back for the 2015 budget. And we're estimating we will need $10,000 more, so that's on tonight. But that is to help us and assist with the additional money for the TIF project that we're doing for the legal services and the map. We had to access Hamilton County for the map and the parcels and things like that. So that and it requires a budget amendment, which is Resolution 2015-032. The next passage of resolution and contract with Stantec, again, that is Resolution 2015-037. So with that, then the property land acquisition, this is not general fund, but this is TIF. This is part of the old TIF, the 1994 TIF. This is tax increment financing fund. This is not general fund. We will have to amend the budget, part of Budget Amendment Resolution 2015-032, to appropriate those funds, because back in when would it have been? December, when we passed the budget, we were at that time unaware or not sure what was going to happen with this property. So we didn't budget for it at that point in time. And of course, with the passage of the resolution and the contract with the owner, Resolution 2015-034, if that's executed, we will be able to, after we meet the contingencies, which will be the contingencies for a survey and basically an environmental, which we'll need to jump on right away, to do our due diligence for environmental testing, which just like with the firehouse property we did. Firehouse property, we had to go all the way to phase 2 because it used to be a greenhouse and different issues. I'm not sure if we'll have to go to phase 2 or not. Environmental with this property, it'll be based upon what they find in phase 1. But at this time, for both the economic redevelopment district, the plan, and or the land acquisition, if the board has any questions from any of us, we'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Trustee Seavey?
Okay. The first thing I'd like to begin with is the entire economic development. And I think you've heard both Will and I say that economic development is no longer a wish or a want to have. It's a matter of survival, and it's a matter of keeping the township where we want to be and where we want others to come to. I see a major difference in what we've done today with Stantec, and that is there are some elements in this that are recognizable from some of the old projects that were on the shelf. There are some recognizable pieces. This has been a want to do. Well, I came onto FAB in 2003 and learned about the one that was in the basement. I don't know how many years before that, right, Dale Weisker? Yes. And then we had another one. And the big difference with this is that this contains an action plan. This contains next step, next step, next step. And the big piece of it is it requires that we all come together and listen and learn and have our opinions heard on how we want our community to go. But this is no longer a like to have, this is a need to have. The three of us were in a meeting this afternoon and learned that Sycamore Township has 13 different TIF districts. 13. We have 1. So we have some catching up to do as far as the overall development. And a lot of it has to do with we've had other priorities over the last years that need to be handled. So now this has come to the top of the list. And I'm really pleased that I see some of the elements from the past, but I see an action plan for us to follow. That's how I feel on the economic development piece. On the property has been somewhere on that shelf for a very long time. And we are very fortunate at this point that the owner, recognizing that his first desire that it be a park, that we are now in a position where we can afford the buying costs. So, and again, I'm going to thank Dale Weisker publicly for helping us go through that, you and our fiscal officer, Luby. And when we look at what we don't offer in the park, it has a lot to do with soccer and lacrosse. And lacrosse is the hottest growing sport. And soccer, we just can't fulfill every field wish that they have. So all the soccer people that we've heard from all these years, come on back to Delhi at some point in time, because it won't be immediately, because it's going to be Grant Park. The point is, the property is here. It's available to buy today. I agree going forward to get that property, and that there's no rush, because frankly there is no funding to jump right in to develop it. So that's kind of my thoughts on this.
Any questions for them?
I don't think so. I think both of them have probably heard from me enough on questions, and I'm very pleased with your presentation tonight. And I know that there's been a lot of work, not only between the two of you, but also our Administrator Landrum and Fiscal Officer Luby. So thank you, guys.
And Tom.
Like Cheryl said, this is time for change. We can't sit back and do nothing anymore. If we do, we're just going to get more vacancies. We're going to lose more business. Property values are going to go down. The way we can increase revenue in the township, increase property values, is through economic development. That's the only way. Through that, we can generate revenue. We can generate revenue possibly for safety services, for more economic development, but it starts with that. We can't sit around and wait. We can't do a study. We need to have something that has an implementation process. Every business plan starts with an idea, ends with a goal or an objective. Where every business plan falls short, and why it doesn't succeed, because there's no implementation. That's what this plan does. This is why it's different. And what it actually does is long term, and my understanding it's about a 9-month plan, and there's going to be a lot of input, or 7-month plan. There's going to be a lot of input from the community, but ultimately when we get the plan, this is going to be a recommendation to our zoning department to make recommendations to zoning to dictate what we want to see in our community and have a structure to it, have an actual community feel, not just any business move in and set up shop. We can't stop that right now. We can't stop it. We have no control over it. When people say economic development, there's a new store came in, oh wow, how is that going to help us? We don't have that control. What this does is we set up a plan, we follow the plan, we change the zoning, we get developers excited because they know exactly what we're looking for and what we want. And that's how we can dictate what our community will look like and not just have a hodgepodge of various businesses moving in and out. So that's why it's so important that we do this. I think they're just as excited with all the economic development happening in Cincinnati. You see a lot of studies, it's one of the top cities. With us only being 15 minutes away, I think they're excited to see what they can do. So it starts now. We said we're going to focus, number one priority, on economic development. I think a year and a half, I said be patient. It's happening, it will. This will take about a 7-month process. After that, we change our zoning, and then we start contacting developers. You may not see this actually take place for another 12 to 18 months. It doesn't happen overnight, but know that we're moving forward, and you're going to see it. And in 3-4 years from now, when you look back, they're going to say, wow, that's where it started. So be patient with us, but it certainly is our number one priority. With regard to land, I agree. I mean, there's very few opportunities in the township to actually acquire property. And the time that previous boards have spent trying to acquire this property and signing leases obviously shows their intent to eventually purchase it. And I think the time's right, with the understanding that we're going to do a lot of grant money. I mean, we understand our situation with the parks and the funding right now, and you're going to have your work cut out for you with grants, but that's the plan. So again, it's not going to be developed overnight. We're going to have to get a lot of grants. And we'll go that route. So I'm excited about both things. I think we're moving Delhi in a new direction. And at this point, I don't have any questions, but if there's anyone in the public that have questions or comments, you can step up to the podium or just raise your hand.
Eddie.
Does Oak Hills buy into retiffing? Do they lose anything from the JADAC?
As any agreements of TIF that we have, they would be made whole in any TIF agreement. I have spoken with the superintendent and made him aware of this. There is a process that Oak Hills would have to go through as far as they have to pass resolution and have a public hearing just like we do. So when we get to that point, they'll have to go through that process. But I will say this, and maybe Trustee Seavey can acknowledge this as well. Oak Hills is very happy with us as far as when we owe them the money to make them whole from our current TIF. They never have to wait on the check, and we help them out in every way we can.
That's right. I left a meeting earlier that included Steve Bain, the treasurer from Oak Hills. So they're familiar with the process. They've done it with Green Township before. So it'll be an easy do, but that's a good question, Ed.
Any other questions or comments from the public? All right, great. Thank you. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you, Pete.